I wanted to say a couple of things about what's happening now and read a couple of poems, and if I can, answer a few questions. But that's very ambitious, all of that. But I wrote this a couple of weeks ago called Dr. King and the Church Today. And I read it in this sanctified church in Newark. That's where I live, Newark. Newark is the third oldest city in the United States. It might be the most abused, the third oldest city in the United States, the brick city, Newark. But anyway, I said Christians, black and white, take a great deal of credit for Martin Luther King, but in most cases, that's all they do. It's like Christians taking credit for Jesus Christ, but how many of them try to live like Christ? That's the big difference. Not to live like regular Christians, but to live like Christ is a big difference. For instance, did you ever get down to why Christ was crucified? Most people call themselves Christians. They don't even know why Christ got iced. Because if you did, you'd know a whole lot more about Christ than most Christians. He was killed by the Roman conquerors with the collaboration of a local bureaucracy. Although they hung a sign over his body, Jesus, King of the Jews. In fact, what led to this was Jesus overturning the tables of the merchants who had set up selling wares and money lending in the temple. Jesus was trying to purify the temple, to purify the religious worship. Martin Luther King also came to prominence through struggle. Dr. King arrived in Montgomery right after Rosa Parks had gone to jail for refusing to sit in the back of the bus. You remember that? Black people had to sit in the back of the bus. Or you people talking about freedom and democracy. That was what, 1955 is when that started. And that happened right after Emmett Till, 13-year-old boy, was murdered for whistling at a white woman in Money, Mississippi. That tells you where we at, Money, Mississippi. And his mother showed the body, took the covers off so people could see how they had crushed his face and put an anvil around his neck and threw him in the Tallahatchie River. Interesting that one of the people that killed him was Miss America's uncle. Show you how these things are connected, you know. Dr. King was elected to be the leader of that struggle in Montgomery. Rosa Parks was not just a tired black woman, as they try to picture her. She was an activist. She had done that before. And remember this, Dr. King, when he was murdered, was only 39 years old. He was a very young man. Malcolm X, when he was murdered, was only 39 years old. Neither one of them turned 40, you know, to show you what was happening. So that in that little space of those years, the turbulence of that was they killed King, Malcolm, John Kennedy, Bobby Kennedy, and it is. That is, they wiped out every vestige of high-level progressive thought. So it's just, the 1950s might be something difficult for some of you young folks and some of you old folks with bad memories to remember, that we were struggling just 50 years ago to sit on the right, have the right to sit on the bus, to sit on a bus anywhere. You know, sounds bizarre, unimaginable. Yet this is just 50 years ago, and some of these people who are now making big noises about democracy were some of the very ones who steadfastly opposed it, i.e., e.g., for instance, this governor of Mississippi, Haley Barbour, who wants to run for president. He says he didn't notice race prejudice when he was growing up in Mississippi. Well, right away, this disqualifies him because it proves he don't have a good sense. You don't remember 1955, the same year as Emmett Till's murder, ironically at the hands of Miss America's uncle, I said. That same year, Reverend George Lee of the NAACP was shot in the face and killed for urging blacks to vote. Not to make revolution, but to vote, to get the right to vote. On August in the same year, Lamar Smith, a World War II veteran in Mississippi, was shot down on the courthouse lawn of Brookhaven, Mississippi, again for urging the people to vote. But the Obama campaign shows that these cold-blooded murderers weren't wrong in trying to stop black people from voting. See, when they let them vote, you see what happened. That's why all these years we've been murdered, poll taxed for trying to vote, especially in the South, because the South was always more black people than anywhere else in the country. In 1961, there was a man named Herbert Lee who was shot and killed in Liberty, Mississippi, and dig this, by a member of the Mississippi State Legislature. He shot him coming out of the court. For what? Trying to vote. So anybody tells you that voting is shallow is stupid. You have to defend that. Our people have died and fought for the right to vote. Read Du Bois, read Martin Luther King, you know. You remember, so that when people talk about democracy in America, you have to say where, when. You must be crazy, you know. Du Bois said the U.S. has never been a democracy. And I guess like in Arizona, where now they go stop Latino studies because they keep saying that the Mexicans down there are teaching them to hate them. And just like in Texas now, they're going to try to strike slavery from the textbooks. In other words, not only they want to beat your butt, but then they want you not to say nothing about it, you know. And that's where we are right now. They're going to try to take any mention of slavery out of the textbooks. I know that some of you remember 1963 when Medgar Evers, state NAACP director, was shot and killed in his driveway by Byron de la Beckworth. Next to Evers' murder, which was just resolved a few years ago, with Beckworth's conviction and death, was the murders of 3 civil rights workers in Meridian, Mississippi. Cheney, who was black, Goodman and Schwerner, Jews, all were murdered. And when the FBI found their bodies, 7 admitted Klansmen were arrested but found not guilty by a jury of Klan sympathizers. Democracy? When? Where? So then, if you understand the barrage of slander, racism, and backwardness faced by the President of the United States, dig that, then you must understand what the opposition, the terror faced by Martin Luther King in that primitive world of the South just 50 years ago. Just 50 years ago, when a whole bunch of you children, the age of Stokely Carmichael and Rap Brown, left college and walked through these roads in the South to get black people to vote at the risk of their lives. Just like Martin Luther King, who was a preacher, came out of the pulpit. Martin Luther King was arrested more than most of these gang members. He was arrested 16 times. Once he was arrested for ordering a sandwich. Tell you about democracy in America. So again, you must understand that the opposition that people like Martin Luther King faced, the Civil Rights Act, not law, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Voting Rights Act, not law, of 1965, did raise the stakes on these kind of murders, but you must understand that that the resistance to Obama is connected to the same insane racism that could commit the kind of crimes I have cited. And the Governor Haley Barbour says he didn't notice any racism. Well, he needs an IQ test, not a campaign for president. But remember, those acts were passed because of the intensity of resistance to the Klan assaults. The intensity of resistance, for instance, I'm going to quote, I can't read all of this, because I did that in California last week. I read this play twice all the way through. I ain't going to do that no more. But this is what King said, and he had just got there. We're talking about that. And usually when we do this play, you know, King, you have the people singing, "This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine, oh, this little light of mine." Are you going to move to the back of the bus? Why? These seats are empty. But King says, when they found Miss Parks guilty, fined her $14. First day of the bus boycott. He said, "In Montgomery, 42,000 of us have refused to ride the city's segregated buses since December 5th. Some walk as many as 14 miles a day." Then the choir would sing, go tell it on the mountain, go tell it everywhere. Our leaders do not have to sell out. See, that's something we still need to hear. As black folks in Congress and the mayors of these cities, our leaders do not have to sell out. Many of us have been indicted, arrested, and mugged. Every Monday and Thursday night, we stand before the Negro population at the prayer meetings and repeat, it is an honor to face jail for a just cause. Of course, then, there was a bomb. He tried to bomb his home in 1956. King said, the bombing of our homes has made us more resolute. When a handbill was circulated by the White Citizens Council, which Haley Barbour says are more responsible than the Klan, that Negroes should be, quote, abolished by guns, bows and arrows, slingshots, and knives. We responded with even great determination. Our church has become militant. 24 ministers were arrested in Montgomery. The church has no alternative but to prove the nonviolent dynamics for social change in the midst of conflict. In Montgomery, we walk in a new way. We hold our hands in a new way. Now, that was King. That was Dr. King, Christian minister speaking. And while we young folks had some disagreement with him, when, they blew up his house after the bus boycott and the black people showed up with their rifles, what shall we do, Dr. King? And he said, if any blood be shed, let it be ours. Now, I was the same age as you young people there. I said, no, it ain't happening like that. Nobody goes. If there's going to be some bloodshed, it's going to be communal, absolutely. But still, so the movement then began to go into two different directions. One, the Southern thing, Martin Luther King. And you have to remember how you could do that, walk through these crazed mobs of folks with the only weapon you had is the crowd itself and the song and your understanding that what you did was just and correct and that you would succeed. Some of the things King had to fight seems absurd to even mention now. You know what I mean? It seemed like crazy people, So the movement sort of had a bifurcation there. In the North, it was, I think, more for self-determination. In the South, it was definitely a question of civil rights, equal citizenship rights. But King, at that time, once he said that about let it be our blood, if any blood be shed, though we still supported him and still loved him to the end. Malcolm X came on the scene, and as Malcolm said, you treat people like they treat you. If they treat you with respect, you treat them with respect. They put their hands on you, send them to the cemetery. We said, there's a very wise person right there. He knows the story. As I said, Dr. King went to jail 16 times, once for even ordering a sandwich. And he knew he had the power and glory of truth, like Fred Douglass. See, oppressed people always have to have a person, number one, who's not afraid to say it, and can say it in a way that nobody else can say it. Like Fred Douglass. What did he do when he said the 4th of July? What did the 4th of July mean to a slave? They invited him to speak in Rochester, New York. He said, what is the 4th of July to a slave? What, did you come to mock me? To say that, he said, he accused them of crimes that would disgrace a nation of savages. There's a slave, get up and say, you are savages. You're worse than savages. You see, because that kind of truth still must be spoken in this country. And it must be spoken, and you young people have to have the courage and the information to speak it. People did not send you to this college so you could drift off into the woods reciting Shakespeare. They sent you to this college so you could come back home and help them fight. You understand that? My son, Raz, who was a councilman now, came back from college. First thing you want to do, run for mayor. Now, wait a minute. You just got out of college last month. You got to wait. But he fought until he got to be a councilman in May. And that's why we sent him to college in the first place, to come back and help us, to help your old parents who've been fighting these same people all these years. Now it's your turn to come back here with more information and the same ghetto heart that you had before. You know. When Dr. King was held in a Birmingham jail, the media accusing him of leading hostile Negroes in a demonstration. You mean if they shoot you, beat you up, lynch you, you think hostility is, it's wild. I don't know. Hostile is actually a very limp response, you know. But anyway, King, talking about that, the famous letter from a Birmingham jail, I'm just reading some of the stuff because I want you to know that he was not the passive individual that McDonald's commercials might suggest. When these white clergymen from Birmingham, after the Supreme Court ruled that, you know, the segregation in Birmingham was unconstitutional, and the white clergy of Birmingham, the white preachers of Birmingham, said that this will lead to tragic social disturbances. I thought they was working for God. They say this will lead to tragic circumstances. What King says is this: you deplore the demonstrations that are presently taking place in Birmingham, but I'm sorry that your statement did not express a similar concern for the conditions that brought the demonstrations into being. I would not hesitate to say that it's unfortunate that so-called demonstrations are taking place in Birmingham at this time, but I would say in more emphatic terms that it's even more unfortunate that the white power structure of this city left the Negro community with no other alternative. Birmingham is probably the most thoroughly segregated city in the United States. Its ugly record of police brutality is known in every section of the country. Its unjust treatment of Negroes in the courts is a notorious reality. There have been more unsolved bombings of Negro homes and churches in Birmingham than any city in the United States. That's King speaking the truth to power. You know. So what he was doing, the demonstrations had real effect. For instance, I said the Supreme Court actually passed that saying segregation in Birmingham was, you know, unconstitutional. What was the answer? George Wallace: segregation now, segregation always. And this is what I want to tell Sarah Palin. You think your words don't have effect on nuts? Right after he said segregation now, segregation forever, stood in the doorway of Alabama University, Medgar Evers was shot to death. So that these words that you use, you know, these symbols putting like gun sights on people's heads, this is not just frivolous. This has real effect, you know. So you have to understand the criminality covered by the local, state, and federal government that always must be opposed and defeated by the people, by we the people. The same victorious coalition that brought Obama into power, that is, that coalition that was 90% black, 60% Latino, 60% Asian, and progressive whites, all those are minorities, that this is the only coalition that can make change. And I don't mean these Tea Party people. There was a man in the 1960s named George Romero. I don't know if you remember George Romero. He predicted the coming of the Tea Party. He had a movie called Night of the Living Dead. You talked about it. How do you? And if you don't think that guy down there in Arizona resembled that flicker with the bald head, he resembled one of them folks, you know. Now, but to show you how usable your mind is for evil a lot of time, is a Negro in Florida who was elected as a Tea Party candidate. You know about him? Lieutenant Colonel in the Marines. He was kicked out of the Marines for firing a gun near an Iraqi's head. No charges were brought against him, and he ran for Congress. Congressman. It's incredible. But even though the Afro-American people are the largest and the oldest social force for change, remember that, the largest and the most consistent force for change. People are always asking me, why is your poetry political? What should I be different from who? Different from Jimmy Baldwin? Or different from Lorraine Hansberry, or Zora Neale Hurston, or Langston Hughes, Fred Douglass. That is our tradition. For oppressed people, that is their tradition. You wake up saying that. My mother, bless her soul, she sent me to take drum lessons, piano lessons, trumpet lessons. I went to art school. She had me reciting the Gettysburg Address every Lincoln's birthday in a Boy Scout suit. Why? Because in that speech you would say, 7 years ago, our fathers, news that this nation, any nation, what does he say? That all men are created equal. All men are created. So I could say that when I was 11, 12 years old. All men are created equal. Until you say that until you understand it. You understand. And remember, just 145 years ago, the Afro-American people were slaves, white people's property. And they were not Africans. They were black Americans. By the 19th century, the Africans had been replaced by black Americans, by Afro-Americans. So there was black Americans that were held in slavery by the 19th century, by the time of the Civil War. And so we have never been passive, the Stono Rebellion. I wish some of you students, while you have time before you get those big jobs or get pregnant or get married, you'd read some of this stuff. The Stono Rebellion, 1739 in South Carolina. The Amistad Rebellion, 1830s. Gabriel Prosser, 1800 in Richmond. Nat Turner, Harriet Tubman, the Underground Railroad, Sojourner Truth, Fred Douglass, Marcus Garvey, W.B. Du Bois, A. Philip Randolph, Fannie Lou Hamer, Robert Williams, Malcolm X, Stokely Carmichael, the Black Panthers, H. Rap Brown, Angela Davis, Martin Luther King were among them. Read that to find out who you are. When Medgar Evers was murdered, Dr. King called the major civil rights organizations together, where this idiot, Glenn Beck, defiled that tradition. He called the major civil rights organizations together and the major unions to plan the March on Washington in 1963. It was a massive progressive force. Some 300,000 people journeyed to Washington, D.C., called together by Dr. King. But at its core, the masses of black people who were still crying, ain't gonna let nobody turn me around, turn me around, turn me around, ain't gonna let nobody turn me around, I'm gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, keep on walking, keep on talking, walking to the freedom land, and we shall overcome. Remember all those songs, old slave songs they sang, which then took on the character of songs for the civil rights movement. And though King's speech has been sampled and diluted by commercial interests, even unfortunately by King's own family, still, it's an important speech. What does he say? 50 years ago, a great American signed the Emancipation Proclamation. 100 years later, the life of the Negro is still sadly crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination. 100 years later, the Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. 100 years later, the Negro has languished in the corners of American society and finds himself in exile in his own land, in his own land, in his own land. We've come here today to dramatize a shameful condition. In a sense, we are come to our nation's capital to cash a check. When the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir. This note was the promise that all people, yes, black people as well as white people, would be guaranteed the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It's obvious today that America has defaulted on the promissory note. America has given the Negro people a bad check. There will be neither rest nor tranquility in America until the Negro is granted citizenship rights. The whirlwinds of revolt continue to shake the foundation of our nation until that bright day justice emerges. And they steady had, we shall overcome. And I have a dream speech. What happened? What was America's answer to that I have a dream speech? A bomb exploded in the 16th Street Baptist Church, killing 4 little girls. Why? because they were trying to vote. They were not terrorists. They were trying to vote, to register people to vote. So they blew up the 16th Street Baptist Church. Over the years, more than 50 bombings have happened in Birmingham and remain to this day unsolved. 4 little girls were killed. And that shows you what kind of terror that you faced. And I swear, sometimes you think about it and you can't, you can barely understand it, But the idea that these were American slaves, these were Americans, black Americans that were now enslaved. And the country could not have reached such outrageous fortune without chattel slavery, without working for those many years, hundreds of years, for no money. And that legacy continues to today. That is why we ought to understand that it is Obama's enemies we have to fight. A lot of us want to fight him. We have to fight his enemies because his enemies were our enemies before he was even born. We have to fight those same people. And that now, it's just like the time right after slavery. Right after slavery, the Civil War, the Emancipation Proclamation, 1863. So after that, there was supposed to be black Reconstruction. What happened? Well, the Klan comes. The Klan doesn't come before slavery. The Klan comes after slavery. So that those people who think that they've defied the Sisyphus syndrome, they are rolling the rock up the mountain, they finally see that the rock is coming back down the mountain. So that today we are facing that same kind of struggle. Every time you think you have gained some ground, the far right in this country, the people that still hold on to slavery, those slaves thought they were free. But there was formed then the Ku Klux Klan, the black codes to make sure we didn't get equal rights and self-determination. These things were formed after slavery to make sure slavery wasn't over. And that's the reason for the Tea Parties and the Republicans' vehement Republican opposition. It's too bad so many people don't understand when they vote against their own best interests. They're so backward, they're attacking laws that would allow most Americans health care. I could not understand with life of me why you would be against health care, except to put money in the insurance companies. I don't understand that, But these people get vehement and crazy about it and talk so much about it in such abstract ways that you can see people being swayed by that. They're so backward, they're attacking a law that would allow most Americans to have health care. The Republicans say it's unconstitutional for your poor people to have health care. They're trying to overthrow the 14th Amendment, which calls for equal protection under the law for citizens. They've already said that corporations are people, that a corporation is a person, since all the persons get equal protection under the law. So the 14th Amendment, they have made so that it refers to corporations. So that if corporations should get equal protection, so that a corporation like General Motors, which is the 15th largest gross product in the world, and the entire Afro-American people, which is 16th, $700 billion, all of us together, that's $700 billion a year. They're saying that the whole of this corporation, which has more money than all of us together, is a person. That's deep stuff. That we are the same. You should get your seatbelts on. This Republican fiasco is going to get rough. But we have to know our friends from our enemies and fight them like you would somebody trying to rob you, because that's what they're getting ready to do. People criticize Obama offensives for the compromise of letting the millionaires maintain their tax cut for the next 2 years in exchange for an extension of unemployment. Well, who would want to do that? Who would say, billionaires, keep your money, don't pay no taxes, you understand? And we will give these unemployed people, you got 2 years where you don't have to pay taxes, you got 2 years unemployment. But that's what we have inherited. To think that somehow Barack Obama is going to overthrow monopoly capitalism in 20 months, is going to overthrow the most powerful imperialist country in the world, is bizarre. That even the things that he has accomplished, he accomplished with much pain, much ridicule. And that even the people that he wants to help would rather put him down than understanding how monopoly capitalism works, and that it's the banks that control this country. It's the banks that control the world, and you have to fight that. You have to fight our enemies, you understand? So I hope that's understandable. That's who we're dealing with. These people who only think of tax cuts, for the rich. The role of the Republican Party and too many Democrats is maximizing the wealth of the corporations and the rich. In fact, that role of the Republicans is to establish corporate rule in America, which is modern fascism. Remember, when privatization comes, you don't have anything to say about that. It's private. Privatization. So the public sector is under attack. The Republicans say they want to get rid of the National Endowment for the Arts. They want to get rid of public radio so that all that we have to hear is Murdoch and his crazy people. Before Bush, you couldn't own print media and electronic media. Bush made so you could own electronic and now print media. So you got to hear now Fox News with the mad people on there, the Wall Street Journal, the Village Voice, all these people owned by the same Murdoch, 20th Century Fox, Channel 9, all day, every day, beating you to death about you are the evil while they are getting away with me. And like this dude, what was the guy's name at this large company, Mr. Full? What was the leg of that company that folded, the huge company that folded? Full was interviewed on television, and the congressman asked him, sir, Mr. Fool, I understood that you, when this company folded, you got away with $134 million personally. He said, no, Congressman, it was only $34 million. Now, what did you get that money for? For managing? We know you can't manage because the company folded. So what did you get? What was the $34 million? Just like these auto industries. I put out 10,000 copies of a newspaper, which is very small, in Denver at the inauguration saying, President Obama, do not bail out these banks. Do not bail out these auto industry. Why should we give our money to rich people so they can stay rich and you stay poor? I don't understand that. I support him, but I do not support that. Why should we give our money to them? Are they giving out any loans, the banks? Have they stopped the foreclosures? 6,000 foreclosures a day? $12 billion a month on a war? What is this? What we have to do is tell Obama to get tough with them and put down his enemies, which are our enemies, and understand the role of monopoly capitalism in this country. What was the answer by racist America to Dr. King's speech on March '63? With 300,000 people marching for equal rights and self-determination. Well, they blew up that church in Birmingham, killed those 4 little girls. One of those little girls was a classmate of Condoleezza Rice, though Rice's father, a Republican, would not march with Dr. King. But, yeah. King said about these children, unoffending, innocent, and beautiful, were the victims of one of the most vicious, heinous crimes ever perpetrated against humanity. Yet they died nobly, martyred heroines of a holy crusade for freedom and human dignity, so they have something to say to us in their death. They have something to say to every minister of the gospel who has remained silent behind the safe security of stained glass windows. They have something to say to every politician who has fed his constituents the stale bread of hatred and the spoiled meat of racism. They have something to say to a federal government that has compromised with the undemocratic practices of Southern Dixiecrats and the blatant hypocrisy of right-wing Northern Republicans. They have something to say to every Negro who has passively accepted the evil system of segregation and stands on the sidelines in the midst of a mighty struggle for justice. They say to each of us, black and white alike, that we must substitute courage for caution. They say to us that we must be concerned not merely about who murdered these girls, but about the system, the way of life, the philosophy which produced these murders. So that was in September. What was the answer for racist America to that speech? November, they killed John Kennedy. Do you understand the climate that's set up by these right-wing politicians? Here's King makes a speech. Kennedy makes a speech. They killed Kennedy November 23rd, 1963. You know, what did the people in Congress, the right wing, they said, the civil rights movement they tried to pass, said, we intended to filibuster this bill till hell freeze over. The civil rights bill. They wanted to filibuster the civil rights bill. But even though July 64th, he passed the civil rights bill. So, I mean, you have to understand that though we have made progress, and we continue to fight to make progress, that you still have a way to go, and a great deal of opposition, you know. Like I said, I criticized Martin Luther King when I was a young man. I couldn't understand the nonviolence. I wasn't violent, but I couldn't understand. But did I learn to understand, why should you, if you got an unarmed constituency, posture like you got weapons? Best thing for you to say is, we are nonviolent, you are violent. We are nonviolent, you are violent. You know, when Dr. King came to Newark, New Jersey, where I live, in March '68 on this Poor People's Campaign, I looked out of the window and I could see people coming up the street, the middle of the street, both sides of the street. They were on the roof, helicopters. And I thought we were about to get busted. That's what I thought, you know. It's getting ready for the police to come in there. The doorbell rang. Who opened? I opened the door. There's Dr. King standing at the doorstep. So there's a photographer who took a picture of me with my mouth hung open. Dr. King came into my house. He said, "Hello, Leroy. You don't look like such a bad person." People told me you were a bad person. I mean, here's King came with stubble on his face, open shirt, Poor People's March. The next week he was dead. When he left Newark, he went back to Memphis to march with the sanitation workers because he always knew the relationship between black people and that poverty and the poverty of the working class, you know. That photo was in the City Hall, Newark City Hall, for years, since 1968 it was in there. And then a reporter called me and said the photo had been removed. I guess the Mayor Booker probably removed it because the photo was probably making noise, you know, every time he passed. The photo would ask him, "Why are you closing the libraries? Why have you fired 167 policemen? Why no Christmas decorations in the largest city in New Jersey?" But it's interesting that he would have to talk about, you know, that photo would have to be removed. To show you what's going on now, that some of our people who come back from these colleges, and that includes you all, who have to be aware of what you're doing with your college education. Cory Booker went to Stanford, Yale Law School. He was a Rhodes Scholar in Oxford University. And so, with the $100 million that Facebook, Zuckerman gave Cory, not the city, he gave it to Cory, to him, what is he going to do? He's going to build a teacher's village in the center of the city with 4 charter schools and housing for out-of-state teachers recruited to teach in them. None of that money is being used for public education. Now, in a city, to give $100 million to a city like Newark and not use any of it for public education is criminal. It's criminal. But that's what we are talking about now. They're trying to make believe that public education is somehow evil, somehow inferior, when most of us went public education. Some of you might have gone to these private schools, but most of us in here went to public schools and public education. And public education never had a bad word until 1954, Brown versus the Board of Education, when, you know, that was passed and the racists took their children out of the schools. And after that, public education became anathema, you know. And so this is another day that we're facing. I talked to Dr. King. He talked about the importance of building a united front, that one ideology could not bring sufficient force to make the change we seek. It's not coincidental that the first and last time I met Malcolm X at the Waldorf Astoria after he'd been run out of his house, a month before he was murdered, we talked about the same thing, the need for a black united front, and obviously for that united front to engage in a larger front. But I also believe we would be stronger if Marcus Garvey and Du Bois were united in one liberation front. I mean, they could fight all day and all night, you know. And King and Malcolm, the same thing. They could argue from dawn to sunset. But at the end of that, we could vote. And you might even say, but I don't even agree with that, just like the Congress. I don't agree with that. But until we get that sophisticated, until you can bring a united front together that can say, this is our main problem, this is what we must do about it, you will never gain the power that you need. Du Bois said that we suffer the Sisyphus syndrome. We push the rock up the mountain, they push it back down. From slavery, we push it up, they push it back down. The 1920s and 30s, we push it up, they push it back down. You know, the 50s, we push it up. 60s, they push it back down. You know, so don't let the Obama election lull you to sleep. You youth are called on to fight, just like you would have to fight when they destroyed Reconstruction after the Civil War. You can cite the wisdom of Jesus, you can cite the wisdom of Dr. King, but you have to study the life of Jesus. It's important. It's important to study the life of Martin Luther King and see what actual resistance they push. You know, now down in Arizona, they're attacking the Latino immigrants. They say now the ethnic studies is illegal. You know, in Texas, they say that they want to make the textbooks no mention of slavery in the textbooks. I mean, you're talking about insane people. You know, you're talking about people who have deep psychological problems. They want you to have withstood 300 years of slavery, then you can't talk about it. That's stupid, you know. Then don't talk about the immigrants when they came over here and all the stuff they suffered. Don't talk about that either, you know. So we're facing a new day, actually. Black people, the only immigrants, didn't come here of our own free will. We didn't come here looking for work, my wife always says. You know, we were brought here against our will at the bottom of a boat. You know, but now they want to ban all ethnic and black studies programs, get rid of any reforms in the financial system, let those corporations run away with our lives, get rid of health reform. They didn't even want to have a peace treaty with Russia. They're trying to keep us in Iraq and Afghanistan and make war against Iran and North Korea. That's what they want to do. Why? Because when war goes on, you know, even old Dwight Eisenhower said the military-industrial complex, they still getting paid. All them wild bombs, new bombs, different kind of, they get paid, you know. The last two speeches, the short speeches of Dr. King that I want to read to show you that he knew what was happening. He said, I stand in the middle of two opposing forces in the Negro community. One is a force of complacency, made up of Negroes who, as a result of long years of oppression, have been so completely drained of self-respect and a sense of somebodyness that they adjust to segregation. And of a few Negroes in the middle class who, because of a degree of academic and economic security, and because at points they profit by segregation, have unconsciously become insensitive to the problems of the masses. The other force is one of bitterness and hatred and comes perilously close to advocating violence. It is expressed in the various black nationalist groups that are springing up all over the nation. This movement is nourished by the contemporary frustration over the continued existence of racial discrimination. It's made up of people who have lost faith in America, who have concluded that the white man is an incurable devil. I have tried to stand between these two forces. I am grateful to God that through the Negro Church, the dimension of nonviolence entered our struggle. If this philosophy had not emerged, I am convinced by now many streets in the South will be flowing with oceans of blood. Oppressed people cannot remain oppressed forever. The urge for freedom will eventually come. This is what happened to the American Negro. After that speech, he led the Poor People's March in Washington and Newark and Chicago. He went back to Memphis, the end of March, led 6,000 protesters through downtown Memphis in support of striking sanitation workers. They were singing, "Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Gonna let nobody turn me around. We'll keep on walking, keep on talking, walking to the freedom land." King said they had to check out the plane I came here to Memphis on. They said they had guarded and protected it all night because I was on the plane. A few years ago, a woman they said was crazed plunged a knife into my chest. And the doctor said if I had sneezed, I would have died. And now I'm in Memphis. And some began to say the threats or talk about the threats that were out, what would happen to me from our sick white brothers. Well, I don't know what will happen now. We've got some difficult days ahead. But it doesn't matter with me now because I've been to the mountaintop and I don't mind. Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place. But I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. And he's allowed me to go up to the mountain. And I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. It may not get there with you. But I want you to know that we as a people will get to the promised land. And I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. April 4th, Dr. King is assassinated. Lorraine Motel in Memphis. So I just wanted to give you a little picture of who King was, what he said, because I believe Dr. King and Malcolm together were a formidable force. And for the Afro-American people to lose those leaders, those principal leaders, those maximum leaders, has been a real sharp blow. Remember, like I said, neither one of them had reached 40 years old. There were people just a little older than you. People like Stokely Carmichael, Rap Brown, Angela Davis were college students. They were young people. You know, they got out of college to fight, you know. And I remember sometimes when my mother would say to you, "Boy, why are you doing these dangerous things?" And I would say, "You the one, you told me, you know, you raised me. While I was trying to eat the biscuits, you was telling me about segregation, discrimination, people getting lynched, people getting locked up. You the one did it. Don't blame me. I was sitting here trying to eat breakfast. You was telling me the history of the Black Liberation Movement." And that's what I'm saying that because you all got the same task ahead of you. Different tasks. It'll be a lot different. You have to use different weapons, but it's the same task. The same task. Let me read a couple of poems, unless you want me to do something else. I'll read a couple of poems, and if you This is a long poem from something called Wise, Wise, Wise. I got that from James Baldwin. You know, James Baldwin said, if you keep asking why, one day you will get wise. Let me see where I want to read. Do, 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 do. Do, 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 do. Do, 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 do. That's Monk, Blue Monk. Do, 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 do. Do 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 do. Do 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 do. Do, 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 do. We are the blues ourselves, our favorite color. Where we've been, half here, half gone. We are the blues ourselves, the actual Guineas, the original Jews, the first Caucasians. That's why we are the blues ourselves. That's why we are the actual song. Do, 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 do. Do, 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 do. Do, 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 do. Do, 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 do. So dark and tragic, so old and magic. That's why we are the blues ourselves, in tribes of 12 bars, like the stripes of slavery on our flag of skin. Africa. Africa. Africa! Go back, black, see yourself. Know yourself, touch yourself, go back, black. World, 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 go back, see yourself, know yourself. Ancient, mighty Africa. Creator of the human being, of music, of dance, of the city. Africa, mighty ancient Africa. But when you put your hand on your sister made her a slave, watch out, Africa. Watch out, Africa, the ghost's gonna get you. When you put your hand on your brother, made him a slave, watch out, Africa. Watch out, Africa, the ghost's gonna get you. Ah! How did I get here? On my back in the dark with the wind and water blowing through my ears. Obatala Shango, save me. Isa, save me. How did I get here on my back in the dark with the wind and water blowing through my ears? Obatala Shango, save me. Save me. At the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean, there's a railroad made of human bones. Black ivory. At the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean, there's a railroad made of human bones. Black ivory. If you ever find yourself somewhere lost and surrounded by enemies who won't let you speak in your own language, who destroy your statues and instruments, who ban your boom ba boom, you're in trouble. They ban your boom ba boom. You're in deep trouble. Probably take you several hundred years to get out. Do 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 do. Do 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 do. Do 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 do. Do 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 do. We are the blues, the past, the gone, the energy, the cold, the sawtooth hotness, the smell above draining the wind through trees. The blue leaves us black, the earth, the sun, the slowly disappearing, the fire pushing to become our hearts. Do 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 do. Ooh, do do do. And now, black again, we are the whole of night, with sparkling eyes staring down like jets to push evening's ascension. That's why we are the blues. The train whistle, the rumble across, the invisible coming, drumming and screaming. That's why we are the blues, and work and sing and lead tales and is with spirit. That's why we are the blues, black and alive. And so we show our motion, our breathing. We moon-reflected soul. That's why our spirit make us the blues. We as ourselves, the blues. the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean, there's a railroad made of human bones, black ivory. I want to close with a poem. I want to close with this poem that got me in some trouble. I was the poet laureate of New Jersey, if you know about ancient history, foreign commentary. We live on a hill in New Jersey, in Newark. You can see the World Trade Center from a third floor of a house. Felipe Luciani called me and said, "Turn on the television. Look, there's buildings on fire." I thought it was like the Empire State Building when I was a kid. A plane hit it. There was a hole in it. And then while I was looking here, the other plane came. So that was really frightening. That was really frightening. That was really frightening. No lie, So I wrote a poem about that after listening to Bush for 30 days. And the things that he was saying, which began to infuriate me. So I wrote this poem, and I sent it around the world. I got mostly good response. Then I was named Poet Laureate of New Jersey by McGreevy. I don't know what was wrong with him, why he did that. I asked him, I said, "You don't know nothing about poetry." The day after I read this poem at the Dodge Festival, I signed books for an hour. The last two people that came up and said, "That was a hateful poem." And I said, "What part?" The next day, the governor's office called and said, "You have to apologize and resign." So you judge for yourself. Dum, 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 dum. Dun, 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 dun. Dun, 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 dun. Somebody blew up America. Dun, 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 dun. All thinking people oppose terrorism, both domestic and international. What one should not be used to cover the other. Somebody blew up America. They say it's some terrorist, some barbaric Arab in Afghanistan. It wasn't our American terrorists. It wasn't the Klan or the skinheads or the them that blows up nigger churches or reincarnates us on death row. It wasn't Trent Lott or David Duke or Giuliani or Schumler. Helms retiring or Helms dead. It wasn't the gonorrhea in costume, the white sheep diseases that have murdered black people, terrorized reason and sanity, most of humanity as they pleases. They say, who say? Who do the saying? Who is them paying? Who tell the lies? Who in disguise? Who had the slaves? Who got the bucks out the bucks? Who got fat from plantations? Who genocided Indians, tried to waste the black nation? Who live on Wall Street, the first plantation? Who cut your nuts off? Who raped your ma? Who lynched your pa? Who got the tar? Who got the feathers? Who had the match? Who set the fires? Who killed and hired? Who say they God and still be the devil? Who the biggest only? Who the most goodest? Who do Jesus resemble? Who created everything? Who the smartest? Who the greatest? Who the richest? Who say you ugly and they the good lookingest? Who define art? Who define science? Who made the bombs? Who made the guns? Who bought the slaves? Who sold them? Who call you them names? Who say Dahmer wasn't insane? Who? Who stole Puerto Rico? Who stole the Indies, the Philippines, Manhattan, Australia, and the Hebrides? Who forced opium on the Chinese? Who owned them buildings? Who got the money? Who think you funny? Who lock you up? Who owned the papers? Who owned the slave ship? Who run the army? Who was the fake president? Who the ruler? Who the banker? Who? Who owned the mine? Who twists your mind? Who got bread? Who need peace? Who you think need war? Who owned the oil? Who don't know toil? Who owned the soil? Who is not a nigger? Who is so great and nobody bigger? Who owned the city? Who own the air? Who own the water? Who own your crib? Who rob and steal and cheat and murder, make lies the truth? Who call you uncouth? Who live in the biggest house? Who do the biggest crime? Who go on vacation anytime? Who kill the most niggers? Who kill the most Jews? Who kill the most Italians? Who kill the most Irish? Who kill the most Africans? Who kill the most Japanese? Who kill the most Latinos? Who? Who own the ocean? Who own the airplanes? Who own the malls? Who own television? Who own radio? Who own what ain't even known to be owned? Who own the owners that ain't the real owners? Who own the suburbs? Who suck the cities? Who make the laws? Who made Bush president? Who believed the Confederate flag need to be flying? Who talk about democracy and be lying? Ho, 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 ho. Who the beasts in Revelations? Who's 666? Who decide Jesus get crucified? Who the devil on the real side? Who got rich from Armenian genocide? Who the biggest terrorists? Who changed the Bible? Who killed the most people? Who do the most evil? Who don't worry about survival? Who have the colonies? Who stole the most land? Who rule the world? Who say they good but only do evil? Who the biggest executioner? Who? Who owned the oil? Who want more oil? Who told you what you think that lady you find out is a lie? Who felt Bin Laden? Maybe they Satan. Who paid the CIA? Who knew the bomb was going to blow? Who know why the terrorists learned to fly in Florida and San Diego? Who know why 5 Israelis was filming the explosion and cracking their sides at the notion? Who need fossil fuel? The sun ain't going nowhere. Who make the credit cards? Who get the biggest tax cut? Who walked out of the conference against racism? Who killed Malcolm, Kennedy, and his brother? Who killed Dr. King? Who would want such a thing? Are they linked to the murder of Lincoln? Who invaded Grenada? Who made money from apartheid? Who keep the Irish a colony? Who overthrew Chile and Nicaragua later? Who killed David Sebeco, Chris Hani, the same ones who killed Biko, Cabral, Neruda, Allende, Che Guevara, Sandino? Who killed Kabila, the ones who wasted Lumumba, Manlane, Betty Shabazz, Princess Di, Ralph Featherstone, Little Bobby, locked up Mandela, Daruba, Geronimo, Assata, Mumia, Garvey, Dashiell Hammett, Alphaeus Hutton? Who killed Huey Newton, Fred Hampton, Medgar Evers, Mikey Smith, Walter Rodney? Was it the ones who tried to poison Fidel? Who tried to keep the Vietnamese oppressed? Who put a price on Lenin's head? Who put the Jews in ovens? And who helped them do it? Who said America first and okayed the yellow stars? Who killed Rosa Luxemburg, Liebknecht? Who murdered the Rosenbergs and all the good people iced, tortured, assassinated, vanished? Who got rich from Algeria, Libya, Haiti, Iran, Iraq, Saudi, Kuwait, Lebanon, Syria, Egypt, Jordan, Palestine? Who cut off people's hands in the Congo? Who invented AIDS? Who put the germs in the Indians' blanket? Who thought up the Trail of Tears? Who blew up the Maine and started the Spanish-American War? Who got Sharon back in power? Who backed Batista, Hitler, Bilbo, Chiang Kai-shek? Who decided affirmative action had to go? Reconstruction, the New Deal, the New Frontier, the Great Society. Who do Thomas Clarence work for? Who doo-doo come out the colon's mouth? Who know what kind of skeezer is a Condoleezza? Who pay Connolly to be a wooden Negro? Who give genius awards to Homo locus subsidiary? Who overthrew Nkrumah, Bishop? Who poisoned Robeson? Who tried to put Du Bois in jail? Who framed Rep. Brown, Jamil Alamein? Who framed the Rosenbergs, Garvey, the Scottsboro Boys, the Hollywood 10? Who set the Reichstag fire? Who knew the World Trade Center was going to get bombed? Who told 4,000 Israeli workers at the Twin Towers to stay home that day? Why did Sharon stay away? Who? Explosion of Owl, the newspaper say the devil's face could be seen. Explosion of Owl, the newspaper say the devil's face could be seen. Who make money from war? Who make dough from fear and lies? Who want the world like it is? Who want the world to be ruled by imperialism and national oppression and terror, violence and hunger and poverty? Who is the ruler of hell? Who is the most powerful? Who you know ever seen God? But everybody's seen the devil. like an owl exploding in your life, in your brain, in yourself, like an owl who know the devil all day, all night. If you listen, like an owl exploding in fire. We hear the questions rise in terrible flame, like the whistle of a crazy dog, like the acid vomit of the fire of hell. Who and who and who and who and who and who? Who? Thank you. Yeah, if you, but they have to talk loud.
Okay. Okay. Listen, Mr. Baraka is willing to take a few questions. There are two ushers in the aisles with mics. We're only going to take a couple. And please speak loudly into the mic.
I can't see well. I see a hand there somewhere.
Right.
Mr. Baraka, thank you very much for an inspirational and eye-opening speech that you gave.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask you one question, and I heard you hit upon it a little bit, and it's a question that I have asked myself for my short 20 years of existence, and it's, is it possible, and at what point can we move past hyphenated Americans, such as African American, Chinese American, so on and so forth? Because I've never considered myself a French American, because I come from 9 generations back around when slaves were being brought over of French heritage. And I was just wondering your thoughts on that.
Well, it's possible. It's the work of generations and generations. You know, James Baldwin said, "I'm only black because you say you was white." You know, wasn't our choice. You know, the question is, how can we heal it? And like I said, the coalition that elected Obama is the only coalition that I think has the material base, you know, to do that. This thing is messed up. God. Anyway. But that's the only, you know, you have to want to do that. You understand what I mean? And it's difficult, but they could bribe people so they could shut up. You know, you can, and then a lot of the people who have something to say you'll never hear. You know, you never know. So it's a task that you have to put your mind to. I think in the 60s and 70s, one thing is said is that the kids, we were serious, you know. Not only the black liberation movement, but the white groups, the Chinese groups, the Japanese groups. I merged with a group of Mexican Americans and Asian Americans in a group called League of Revolutionary Struggle. We were serious about that. But you have to build some stability so you can study the problems. You know, your emotion is not enough. You know, you have to study the problems. And even writing poetry, study is important. You have to study what's going on. What is happening to us? Do we know? Can we trace trends? You know, I thought the Obama election was a kind of high water point, but there is a real sickness in this country. There's some people who really, I don't mean, you know, like the Wagner who run around shooting people, but I mean the kind of mentality that actually assumes supremacy over other people. That's a mental problem. And it's going to take a lot of work to get rid of that problem. You know, it's definitely a problem, though, you know. But, I mean, you got work to do. These black, Latinos, these women students, all y'all got work to do. Like I said, you got to come home. and help. And in that struggle, you'll find some clarity too. Struggle, it gives great clarity. If you're working to do something every day, you'll get clear on what it is, But it's a good question, and it's the task. It's the task that we had. Now, before, it's been very difficult to do that for black people because we didn't have anything, nothing, slaves, and it's hard for a slave to say, well, we equal, because it wasn't true. It was true in essence, but not true materially, But now some of you are coming out of these colleges and stuff, instead of going off somewhere acting weird, you have to come back with that information. No, that's serious. You have to come back with that information. I mean, if people can create Facebook and all that stuff, they're smart enough to come back and do something to build a community, a multinational community that can fight these crazy people. Of course, who do you have to fight? The banks, the insurance companies, they run this country. The corporations, they run it. How can you be in a depression and somebody's getting a $60 million bonus? I mean, where is that coming from? $40 and $50 million bonuses. Why? For making money for a specific corporation. It's. Also, I wish you all would study socialism. You should study the works of people like Lenin and Mao Zedong. Study Marx, no matter what these people tell you. Science is science. So what has happened in the United States, they have enough money to buy people. They have enough money so that even the most brilliant of you can be bought. You know what I mean? Hey, look, we give you this job. You can make, $20 million, blah, blah. So it's a difficult task, and it's getting more difficult because you have more qualifications to be among the oppressors. Yes? I can barely see you. Is that somebody standing up over there?
No, I'm just waiting.
Oh. Okay, is there any other questions? I can't see. Yeah, over there, I think. Was that somebody?
Mr. Baraka, I want to thank you for coming out. I think the biggest problem in terms of getting people over here on the right.
You need to turn the light on, man. I can't see. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think the biggest problem that we're facing is apathy and people not really critically thinking about their situation and realizing that they can improve it. I was wondering if you could talk about ways to get people engaged, get people thinking about new solutions and new ways of life.
Well, it's not altogether, it's self-interest too. Because remember, when they were drafting your students, the students were out on the street acting crazy. I mean, that's why the Vietnamese War came to an end. The student movement, the Black Liberation Movement, the Asian and Latin movement made them get out of Vietnam. But now, since they don't draft you, you all are not worried about that. You'll let this war go on forever. You see? So you have to remember that it's self-interest creates that kind of apathy. You think these people are dumb? They're not dumb. They saw what happened when they was trying to draft people. So what did they do? They want to let the working class whites and those oppressed nationalities go and fight the war. They ain't got no job. They're not going to college. We'll send you to college, yeah, if you get back alive. So remember that, because there are things you can do on this campus to learn to struggle. But that's the big thing. The apathy is not really apathy, it's self-interest. It doesn't bother you that people in Afghanistan and Iraq dying because they're not asking you to go. And that's slick of them to do that. Other questions? I can't see.
Thank you, Mr. Baraka. One question I have is, some people debate whether or not LGBT rights movement is a continuation of Dr. King's civil rights legacy or not. And I want to ask your opinion on that, and what advice do you have for the LGBT rights movement?
The what people?
Lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender.
Well, it is a civil rights question. You know, my daughter, who was murdered by a Negro asshole, was gay. She and her partner were both killed. You know, so it is a civil rights. You know, people should be able to live their lives the way they want to live them, as long as they don't interfere with you. Same way with this anti-abortion trend that's coming up. Why do you want to bother? Somebody don't want to have the baby, they don't have to have a baby. What do you want them to have a baby for? Why are you in their lives? You know, so it's the same question with the lesbian and gay thing. Who are these people who are so against that? What is it? You know, what is it? What does it make you think? Does it threaten you or something? You know, it's a very weird thing because, yeah, my little girl was murdered by an asshole like that. You know, that somehow, because she was very independent and very, you know, this man was messing with her sister and she jumped in his face. Don't be doing that, blah, 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 blah. He shot her and killed her. So they think that women should be passive and not, you know, say anything. And it's very, 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 very weird thing. But you have to support people's civil rights. Otherwise, why should they support yours? You know, that's the question. Nobody's asking you to change your lifestyle. They're asking you to support what is correct. You know, civil rights, that's all. No big thing. I mean, that same question, people say, do you think these Negroes should be able to come in this store? Oh, wait a minute, they can't come in the store with us. When I went to Howard, what we used to do, we used to go in this place called a People's Drugstore. We order a whole lot of 2 hamburgers, please, and 2 orange sodas, and, you know, some French fries. And they would come and say, well, you can't eat that here. Okay, solid, you got it, you know. Leave it right there, you know, because we were not going to be bullied by them, you know. So you have to stand up. You have to fight these people. There's no way you can get around it. You might think you can slide around corners and slip and slide, but ultimately you're going to have to stand up. You're going to have to speak out. You're going to have to support what is correct and oppose what is incorrect. You have to do that. Otherwise, the country is in, well, the country is, what would you call it? It's in danger because this right-wing movement could take us all the way back. You know what I mean? If people are telling you to take slavery out of textbooks, then that means they want to eliminate the whole Black Studies thing and eliminate any truthful text that tells the history. They don't want to know the history because they don't want to know who they are. You know. I remember one time my mother and father took me down south to Alabama. My family had been run out of Alabama. My grandfather owned those small stores. They set them on fire. 2 stores, they set them on fire. You opened a funeral parlor. They told them they were going to kill him. So they moved to Pennsylvania, then to Newark. But my mother took me down, and my mother and father took me down to Alabama, and I was just learning to read. And so I was in there reading all the signs, you know. And then I said, LSMFT, Lucky Strike mean fine tobacco. This guy, the clerk in the store, looks around and says, some folks talks too clear. Now I was a little boy, you know, but what could I do to him? But the point that the fact that I could read upset him. You know, a little teeny boy up there, you know, LSM, Lucky Strike mean fine tobacco. Some folks talks too clear. But I understood instinctively what he meant. He meant, boy, why are you reading? You're threatening my self-concept. You're threatening who I am in the world because you can read. Yeah, little did he know, he's probably right. Okay, any other questions? I can't See, if not. Okay, thank you very much.